morning. I'm Chief of Police Ed Lennon. I stand before you today to report that Jonnathan Jara-Aucapina, age 27, was arrested this morning by members of the East Javen Police Department in connection with the murder of Lizzbeth Aleman-Popoca, age 27, of East Javen. Jonnathan Jara-Aucapina has been charged with murder. He's currently being held on a $2 million bond and will be arraigned in New Haven Superior Court tomorrow. I am accompanied today by Lizzbeth's father, Albino Aleman-Popoca, and Lizzbeth's sister, Jonnathan Aleman-Popoca. In addition, also present are Mayor Joseph Kafora and members of the East Javen Police Department. Lizzbeth was a vibrant mother, daughter, and sister who leaves behind a 7-year-old daughter. This daughter, in one act of domestic violence, will spend the rest of her life without her mother. This is not how any child should live or grow up. Father no longer will have a daughter, and his sister will no longer have her sister and best friend. I sincerely hope today's arrest will begin the path for justice that Lizzbeth and her family ultimately deserve, after the senseless act of domestic violence was perpetuated against her. This is a very complex investigative case that has taken months to investigate. We strive as an agency for transparency, which is why it was frustrating for us to not be able to disseminate the details of this case until today. If we had discussed this case, we were concerned that certain details would have compromised evidence, and some details were only known by Jonnathan and may have alerted him. Our commitment to bringing justice to Lizzbeth and her family began on the day she was reported missing and continued all the way until today. We assigned a sergeant and an officer solely to work on this case every day, and will have personnel available to further support the family and the state's attorney's office while this case proceeds through the court system. Although we must keep most details from being discussed in order to not compromise the case, I will provide you with a brief summary. In short, Jonnathan concocted a story that Lizzbeth had ran off when he knew she was already dead. He then used this story to lie to her family, her loved ones, and then eventually law enforcement when her family basically forced him to report her missing. After this initial missing persons report, Jonnathan continued to lie to investigators and also tried to conceal where he had buried her. After reviewing hundreds of pieces of evidence and conducting countless hours of interviews, investigators were finally able to secure a warrant for his arrest. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank members of the East Javen Police Department, the Connecticut State Police, the New Haven State's Attorney's Office, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation for all their hard work and support in finding both Lizzbeth and investigating this case. I'd also like to thank the Branford, North Haven, and New Haven Police Departments for their assistance on various parts of this investigation. I would especially like to recognize Sergeant Jeff Follett and Officer Anthony Fiorillo, who are both standing here behind me today. They worked non-stop on this case since July. It was true hard work, investigative work by all these officers, investigators from our department and various agencies that were able to help find Lizzbeth and make today's arrest. In conclusion, you will see us standing here today wearing some variation of purple to recognize domestic violence victims. Domestic violence has no place in our community, and we strive as an agency to combat spousal abuse and all forms of domestic violence at all costs. Far too often, victims find themselves in a cycle of domestic violence in which they feel there's no way out. We're here to tell you there is hope. There are people who care, and we care. You are not alone in your fight to end domestic abuse. I'll ask everybody just to take a moment to remember Lizzbeth and hope their family obtains some level of closure through today's arrest. I'll be happy to answer some questions for you today. However, I'm not going to provide specific details regarding the entire investigative case. But before I do that, Lizzbeth's father, Albino, would like to speak briefly to all of you.
Buenos días. Primero que nada quiero dar las gracias a la policía de East Javen que estuvieron colaborando. Bueno, esto no ha terminado, esperemos que el juez dé una sentencia correcta, porque nuestra familia no va a ser la misma nuevamente. Destruyeron a mi familia, nunca más va a volver. va a volver a hacer lo mismo. Me siento muy triste, mi hija, esto no me va a volver a mi hija, pero me gustaría que fuera como un ejemplo para que esto no vuelva a suceder. Yo creo que nadie se merece esto. Y muchas gracias a los señores que participaron en toda esa investigación y esperemos que haya una condena que sea justa, porque esto nadie se lo merece. Eso es todo. Muchas gracias.
I'm going to be translating for Albino. He wants to thank the East Javen Police Department for their hard work. He says that this really destroyed his family. It's been a rough time for him. All he asks is that for true justice to be served at the end of this, which he wants to bring some comfort to his family, and that this be a light at the end of the tunnel for other families as well, and a beacon of hope. And he just wants to thank the East Javen Police Department, all the agencies that helped out, and the community as well.
Anybody has any questions? I'd be glad to take a few questions.